How to hold a snare drum stick. The best way to teach students how to hold a stick, one stick at a time. Take the stick, divide it into 3 equal parts. Grip the stick between the thumb and index finger on the bottom third of the stick. This is called the fulcrum. Use the teeter-totter analogy that this is where the stick will pivot in the hand. It is very, very important that the student places their thumb print on the stick. Bad habits include putting their thumbnail on the stick and letting the thumb slide off the stick. The angle of the stick should not be too far in the fingers, creating a right angle, or straight up and down. In this situation, the back fingers are not participating in the act of drumming. The proper playing position for the stick is for it to be at a slight angle across the hand. If you grab the fulcrum or even balance the stick on the fulcrum, the stick should bounce repeatedly and then come to rest. It should get quite a few bounces before the stick finally comes to rest on the drum head. If you have a very steep angle holding the fulcrum and drop the stick will bounce perhaps once or twice and then come to rest. You're not going to get as much rebound out of the stick. If you play too flat, you run the risk of hitting a rim shot and the stick will die, or you'll miss the head entirely. Hit the rim. Playing area on a snare drum. Center of the drum, center playing area, is going to have the thumpier sound. More fundamental, less overtone. Slightly off center is going to have a little less fundamental and slightly more overtones. On the very edge, you're going to have very little fundamental at all and lots of overtones. Now, for general playing, I like students to play in the center of the drum head. For dynamic reasons, if a student is playing a pianissimo passage, I have them play on the edge of the snare drum. Now we're going to talk about stroke types. Now, stroke types are the equivalent of tone production in wind players. The sound that we achieve out of different instruments is created by the way that we strike the instrument. We're going to talk about 4 different types of strokes specifically. Full strokes, down strokes, up strokes, and dead strokes. The first stroke that we're going to discuss is a full stroke. Make sure that the student divides the stick into 3 equal parts. Thumb is on the stick and has an appropriate fulcrum. Back fingers are around the stick. Now the full stroke is created starting with the bead of the stick up in the air. Wrist is low to the drum. Bead is pointing up in the air. The stick will travel down, strike the drum, and then return immediately to where it started. A full stroke. When performing a full stroke, the back fingers are still around the stick, but there is space between the palm, the stick, and the fingers. It allows the stick to breathe when it's forced down to the head. So there should be some wiggle motion available to the stick. The stick is pivoting on the fulcrum created by the thumb and index finger. A downstroke. Quite simply, the stick travels from its up position, wrist down, tip up, strikes the drum. After striking the drum, the stick is stopped by the student between 1 and 2 inches away from the drum head. Now, going back to the reasons why we hold the stick like we do. Dividing the stick into thirds is important because it creates rebound. If we hold the stick too far back, the stick will not rebound as many times. Now, on a downstroke, the object is to keep the stick from rebounding. So, by applying slightly more pressure and closing the back of the fingers, it's going to keep the stick from bouncing. Unlike the full stroke, where the back of the hand is open, the downstroke, the back finger should be slightly closed, with the ring finger gently brushing against the palm. The upstroke, usually used in tandem with downstrokes. The stick begins 2 inches from the head, strikes the drum, and then the tip ascends to an up position. Normally, downstrokes and upstrokes are practiced together. Here's an example of down followed by upstrokes. The last stroke type that we'll be discussing is a dead stroke. The stick begins up position, ends up, forced into the head, dying away on the drum. You'll notice during a dead stroke the looseness of the grip in order to let the stick rebound as much as possible.